This week, we got the first crop of casting rumors for what I think is the third movie in James Gunn's new DCU. So first, we're doing Superman. That comes out very soon. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, that has already started filming. I don't know if it's filmed yet. And then the third movie, for some reason, is Clayface. And the some reason is it seems like Mike Flanagan, who people know from the Haunting Hill House and all those shows, was very interested in making a movie about Clayface. And I believe he's producing it, and I think originally he had written the script, but now it seems like they might not be using that script. Also, Mortimer's on my lap because we're talking about movies about villains in the Batman universe, and he wants them to make a Catman movie so much. I think they probably will, honestly. He'll probably be in the Secret Six or something. But Mike Flanagan was passionate about this project, and that was enough to get it greenlit. Now they have a new director on board. It is James Watkins, who is the director of Speak No Evil. So that's a pretty recent movie people like, but we haven't heard very much about who's going to play the actual Clayface. Now, first of all, before we talk about actors, let's just talk about Clayface as a character. This is a character who has had so many different incarnations. There have been so many different versions of Clayface. The version most people are familiar with is probably not the version they think they're familiar with, because we know that this movie is going to take inspiration from the Batman the Animated Series episode Feet of Clay, which chronicles an actor who uses a goo that lets him reshape his face so that he can maintain his youth and continue to act, but then too much exposure to the goo turns him into a goo monster who can take on any shape, but also doesn't really have like his own shape, so it's a tragic horror figure. The thing that I think is interesting is, for most versions of Clayface, most versions I'm familiar with, and like I would say the default Clayface is usually a character named Basil Karlo. However, the version in the animated series, and I did not realize this, is a different Clayface, and his name is Matt Hagen. My guess is they will take the story of Matt, but give it to the more popular version of the character that people know, which is Basil, which is also just like a more interesting name for a not that Matt's not an interesting name, but Basil's like very memorable. But okay, so it seems like we have 4 actors that might be up for the role of Basil / Matt. I'm gonna go over them one by one. I think they all are interesting. They definitely all point to a specific kind of character that is going to be the focus of this movie, which was not necessarily what I expected for a Basil Karlo or Clayface as the actor movie. This is a character who like needs to be able to take on lots of roles. So I do think if you have a movie about Clayface, there will be many people that will be playing the role of Clayface because he will be transforming into many different people. But there will be like a standard guy that Clayface is, so it's going to be one of these 4 guys. And it could be many other people. These are the first 4 names that have been leaked. So let's start with George McKay. People probably remember George McKay from 1917. I do not know him from too much other stuff. Sometimes I see him and I think it's Harris Dickinson, but it's not. It's George McKay. I think he was very good in 1917, and that obviously was an incredibly grueling shoot. I wouldn't say it's the same type of character that I would expect from a Clayface movie, but it's a role that proves that this actor can take on challenges, but that's really all I can say for him. However, we're looking at actors in their like 30s maybe, which I think is surprising. Part of me sort of expected that the Clayface we'd be dealing with here is an over-the-hill actor who's like on his last legs. Now, it could be the case that Basil is like an actor in his 50s or 60s who wants to be a hot young guy, so he reshapes himself to look like George McKay, like someone in that age range. That's possible, but also this could be a different take on the character. Either way, George McKay is the start of a trend here. So he's 33 right now, also British. We're going to get a couple of those. But like right off the bat, my impression of him, fine, interesting. Second actor, we got Tom Blythe. So people probably recognize him from The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, where he played the bad guy, Ulysses Snow, or what the heck was that character called? Aloysius. It was like a stupid name. Coriolanus Snow. There we go. This is interesting now because now we're getting a few things. Number one, also British. Also in his 30s. I believe this actor is 30. So Tom Blythe is now working on a movie based on the Hemingway novel A Farewell to Arms about a World War I soldier who falls in love. So this would be like another romantic lead. I do think something with Tom Blythe that we see a little bit of with George McKay. These are both guys that I would kind of describe as like pretty, you know, especially Tom Blythe. Like Coriolanus Snow is a fancy man, right? He's from high society. He's got blonde hair and wears fancy clothes and stuff. Now, that's not to say I don't think that actor can play a different kind of character. But again, another thing I maybe wasn't expecting. And just between the two of them right now, I guess I lean towards George, but there's more. Next up, we have Leo Woodall. So most people would recognize him probably from season 2 of White Lotus, where he plays a character that has a lot going on. I don't want to fully explain it because it's It's a lot, but he is sort of, I would say this character is described as a F-boy, as HBO would say. So he's British. Again, a third Brit has entered the chat. And I'm really surprised by this because most versions of Clayface that I'm familiar with, besides the one from the new Batman Cape Crusader show, aren't characters with the British accent, right? Like, this is not a defining feature of Clayface. Although Basil Karlo, I guess you could say that's who he is. I do think the thing with Clayface is, like, by the time we get to him, his voice sounds like a monster voice, but it's also like a New York, New Jersey kind of monster voice. Anyway, Leo Woodall, a little bit younger. He is 28. Apparently he's dating Megan Fahey from that season of White Lotus that he was on, although I don't think those characters interacted. So that's interesting. But again, I think we're skewing towards young, British, pretty guys. This is someone who I think maybe like 15 years ago, I think this would be like a Tom Hiddleston kind of role, it seems like. So between these three, right now, I don't have one that I really feel more strongly about. At this point, I'm kind of looking at those three performances that I know each of them from, but they all have a huge body of work, and I'm sure they don't just all play the exact same character in everything. But like, you see someone who was in 1917, and that's obviously what you're going to think of first. But like, do I think any of them are better than the other one? Not really. But then we have the fourth option. And again, there could be plenty of other people that are in contention for this role, but let's say it's these four, and they've like made it to the final round. We got Sinners, Jack O'Connell. Now, I think out of the four of them, he's immediately the most interesting. He's 34, English and Irish, coming off of one of the big movies of the year in one of the, I would say, kind of close to breakout roles of that movie. Because, yeah, obviously Michael B. Jordan and Haley Steinfeld came out of that movie looking really good, but like, they're also big stars. I would say Jack O'Connell has been working for a while, but he's not necessarily like a household name the same way that those other guys are. But he played the villain in Sinners. I think he was incredibly charismatic. It was an excellent performance. Apparently he's going to be in one of the new 28 Days Later movies. I know they're making like 3 of those, probably the new one that's going to come out soon. But I would say out of these 4 people, he is easily the one that interests me most, because he showed a lot more range in that Sinners performance than I think any of those other actors in the performances that I'd highlighted from their career. Again, does that mean he's the best actor? Not necessarily, but I think that gives him, at least for me, a leg up. He's actually got a big franchise coming up. So he is in Godzilla X Kong Supernova, or whatever the next one of those is called. Besides that, he's free for the future. I think that's important, because if I were just, picking one of these 4 guys to play this character, I'd pick him, because I do think Sinners was great. He was great in it. And like, one of those roles where you see someone come out of that and you go, that guy's going to be a star. Like, get him other roles. So like, Clayface, sure. My thing with Jack O'Connell, though, is like, sure, he could be Clayface, but like, he could also be Batman. And I said that when I read this article. Like, I was like, oh yeah, he would be an interesting Batman. And I don't know physically how he would stand up to the Corn Sweat, but like, I think just from seeing that performance in Sinners and seeing him outside of Sinners, just like looking at him, I'm like, I could totally see that guy being Batman. That was before I looked up. Apparently there were rumors that he was one of the actors that was up for the Batman. So it seems like, I believe Robert Pattinson and Nicholas Hoult were like the 2 finalists, but I'm guessing at certain other levels, other actors were in play. He may have been one of the other ones. And now, like, just looking at him now, coming off of Sinners, I'm sure he could do Clayface. I'm sure he could do a great job with that. I think there's a couple of actors that could play Batman, and we really don't know exactly what they're looking for from Batman. And I'm also not even 100% sure that they are not going to fold the Batman into James Gunn and Safran's new DCU. I know they say they're not going to do that now, but like, things change. But if they do need a new Batman, I think Jack O'Connell could be a really interesting choice. So that's my only negative here. I would say, out of the 4, he's the one that stands out. But then, does he stand out so much that maybe he needs another role? And maybe, there were rumors that these guys were all testing for this role, but really, 3 of them were testing for Clayface, and he was going in and testing for another character. That's like a crazy out there theory. I have no evidence to support that. However, I would have to imagine Batman's going to be in this Clayface movie. I also assume this is going to be the Clayface from Creature Commandos, because Clayface was in that, and that is in this universe. But yeah, it's interesting, right? This is going to be the 3rd movie. If this were like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2. We're doing Superman, Supergirl, Clayface. And there's going to be shows in between, obviously, Peacemaker, Lanterns. And by the time this movie comes out, we'll at least have a Batman, because I imagine they're going to try to make Brave and the Bold pretty soon. It's a different conversation whether they should try to fold in the Batman movie. But beyond that, if they're looking for a different guy, I think they could do much worse than Jack O'Connell. And this doesn't come out for a little while, but like it comes out right now. I believe it is scheduled for September of 2026, which is like a year and a couple months, and we have to cast this character. It seems like maybe the script is in a little bit of a flux. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets pushed to 2027. And Supergirl is the only big theatrical release from DC, which I think would, be a bummer. Because it seems like they have a lot of cool ideas and things they want to do. But like looking at the progress they've made so far, I think if this movie comes out next year, we're going to have to know who's playing Clayface pretty soon. I believe it's been rumored that this will be a lower budget movie than, say, Superman, which I believe is something in the 200 millions. I think I saw this was rumored for 40 million. I could see anything under 100 feeling smaller than just a lot of these humongous comic book movies. But I think you could definitely make a movie about Clayface for that much money that is dramatic and interesting. I've seen this script compared to like The Fly or some Cronenberg body horror stuff. Like, that doesn't need to be incredibly expensive. So like, my fingers are crossed that this works. And yeah, if I had to pick one of these guys, Jack O'Connell. He's just great. And you know what else is great? Nebula. Oh, Nebula. We're talking about Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create. Supporting Nebula is the best way to support this channel. All my videos go up early, ad-free. For videos like this, maybe a day early, maybe 6 hours early. For videos on Nando V Movies, maybe a month early. A lot of it depends on the production schedule, but you will see my videos before anybody else sees them. There's also all kinds of great Nebula original content like Jet Lag, but also documentaries and also, fiction stuff that we're working on. I'll probably talk more about that soonish. And like, just go to Nebula, look around, we'll find cool stuff by cool people. Abolish Everything, I love that. I was at a taping in one of those. I haven't performed, but I mean, I was in the audience at it, which is kind of performing. You're laughing and clapping and stuff, and you're part of the show as far as I'm concerned. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60, which is like $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year Nebula for $36. That is $3 a month. It is an incredible deal. Go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. You'll be happy that you did. All right, that's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.